I'm actually really interested to see what he says. Balance killed the RPG and mmoRPG, but Ash of Creation is bringing back. Now, on surface level, I agree with him. Trying to balance all of the classes, first of all, is a headache for the developers. Second of all, in a sense, not all classes should be equal in what they can do. I agree with this. However, the feeling the player gets when they just start a game and they made the wrong choice. Like, I want to be the best in PvP, but the class you chose is the worst for PvP. That feels really bad. So in that regard, it sucks, but I see the point of like why this is also very bad for the mmoRPG genre as a whole, that you're trying to balance out all of the classes and stuff like that, and all of the, all of the effects, stuff like that. I understand the problem, but this is also the problem with, like, it's a game with other players, so you have to try and balance it as much as you can, like in between, or it's like everyone should have their own strengths and weaknesses. So it's a very mixed thing. However, it does kill the RPG aspect, obviously, of an mmoRPG, right? Makes sense.
Good to see you all again, Blizzard, Riot, for this annual mmoRPG meeting. As you all know, this year's performance across the board has been acceptable. A profit increase of 69% will land you guys a considerable bonus by year's end. It looks like that yacht is looking promising, Cortex.
Yes, I love sailing on the oceans of tears as we introduce new furries to that blasted game. So easy to monetize.
Extremely
Yes.
easy, yeah.
Moving on, there's very little complaints about the future of this genre as well, which is quite laughable, really. Get a load of this. There's YouTubers out there that we haven't even paid that has convinced everyone that the world of Riot's MMO is already complete. Oh, Mr. Greg.
So, as someone who reacted to Necrit's video about it, is the world complete? I would say no and yes. Yes, the zones, so like the map is complete, but the content in each map, we don't know anything yet. We don't know if there's quests in those zones, if there are explorables, if there's dungeons, if there's like raids in those zones. We don't know a lot of things. We can assume that like Mount Targon is a raid. We can assume that certain stuff are raid, but technically we don't know what is in every content. And also, like, assuming that Mount Targon is not even like in the release of it. Between Noxus and Demacia, there are a good chunk of zones, but we don't know much about the zones. Like, we know approximately stuff, but it's like we don't know if there's like certain things to do in those zones, ruins to explore, or anything like that. We don't know much about the zones outside of the main cities, right? Which is basically where most of the game is going to happen, outside of the main cities, right? Most of your leveling experience usually is outside of the main cities. So technically, I understand his point when he says the world's not ready or the world is not created yet, but at the same time, the map is already there, the lore is already there. So in that regard, that part is ready, but that's not the whole world of Riot MMO, so technically he is right.
Treat has pretty much managed to convince everyone Riot's MMO will be amazing with just a few vague tweets. Great job.
So for that one, I would say there's a lot of hopium and copium in that. But the thing is, even if it's not amazing, the problem is, like, Riot and League of Legends, people who are following it, there's just so many. I think it's like over 100 million players, 100 million players play League of Legends. So, like, already you have those ones, they're, like, involved with the League lore to an extent. Right? Then you had people who watched Arcane. They're going to be interested, right? So as long as they build this whole universe around it and then they release it, it's similar to like how so many people played World of Warcraft because of Warcraft 3. People loved Warcraft 3 so much that they want to go into World of Warcraft, right? So you already had the player base. It was like, it's a natural thing that you got 13 million, 12 something million players playing Wrath of the Lich King because of World of Warcraft 3. By far, that was the main reason people played Wrath of the Lich King. Not because they cared too much about like how good World of Warcraft was, because in my opinion, it wasn't. right? Not back then, still not a good game, right? It's like it has good mechanics, don't get me wrong, but still, as a game, it's pretty bad. Always has been.
Well, I learned from the best, didn't I?
Yes, indeed. However, there is a slight concern. Apparently, players are not happy with the balance across the board.
Oh god,
It's a
he's still in the
complete mess,
underwear.
barely even
Fuck.
playable according to the majority. What's going on over there in the balance department?
Oh, well, you see, it's quite difficult to balance such a diverse game with...
Silence! Listen to me, whelp. Failure is not an option here. If you cannot deceive the players by at least pretending our MMOs are balanced, then you are of no use here. Be gone!
See, but the
With
thing
that,
is, most of the points he's making about like why Riot MMO and like all that stuff are like very bad, you can probably say it for Ashes, right? It's like the world of Ashes is also, I would say, not ready. Because again, the world map is ready, right? The lore is there, but all the other content, we don't know anything because we haven't been shown anything. Like we have the Hunter class, maybe 3 other classes that had a showcase, and it's like, okay, you have a 64 combination of classes, right? So it's like, how ready is it? Probably not, you know?
I actually already have a replacement. Come on in, Bozo. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. Really. But did you just throw that guy out the window? Oh, never mind that. We're all pretty much clowns around here, so I think you'll fit in just fine. Hey, what up, boys? Balance in an MMORPG is certainly a touchy subject. I'm sure there's parties for and against certain aspects when it comes to balance, and today I plan to exploit your points of view to farm engagement for this video.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, that's right. We've gone full corporate mode now, and I take only advice from my analytics. And my analytics say nobody gives a shit about Ashes of Creation anymore. But fuck it, this game is what you come to this channel for.
I mean, the thing is, it's like, how much shit can you give about a game that is not released yet, you know, or like even you have a release date or anything? That's really hard, right? Even me, as much like I watched the Ashes of Creation, I understand the lore to an extent, right? And it was interesting at that, but it's like I'm not gonna keep being super interested in because like there's nothing to be interested in yet. I really want to play the game, don't get me wrong, but it's like, when is it coming out? Anything like that. And it's fine. They can take all the time they want. I'm not saying that. But obviously the interest gauge is gonna go down at some point, right? It's like you can't just keep being fucking like, oh, you're not gonna be hyped the whole time. So like, yeah, it is what it is, right? It's like, and it's cool that he keeps covering Ashes, and that's fantastic, but I'm sorry, the interest gauge will go down until something else is revealed that is, oh my god, and groundbreaking, right? And as cool as the archer class, whatever it was, hunter class, archer class, whatever, was as cool as it wasn't like groundbreaking. There are some cool skills, whatever, but it's not like something that's like, holy shit, I can't believe we finally get to see this specific thing, right? Hunter class, I would say maybe 15% of the player base would be a hunter, so it's like, how interested are they in the hunter class? I don't know. A lot of people like big swords and being a warrior, right? A lot of people like being rogues and stealthy. So it's like, the interest gauge will go down, right? It's like the professions. A lot of people don't care about professions, even though it's cool that they have them and cool how they work. That's not a groundbreaking thing. Like, once you go into like, what's called like ship battles, right? On the open sea, people will be, again, more interested. Stuff like that, right? But it's like, you need something to actually interest the people instead of like, you know, I call it mediocre things. Obviously, the game is nothing close to mediocre, but it's like the information so far hasn't been like groundbreaking, you know?
And I'll be damned if I'm going to abandon my cash cow. Brute force is what I've been taught, so I'm a force more baseless, speculative Ashes of Creation content down your throat, whether you like it or not.
Well, the other thing is, it's like, I understand, like, it's like, is it his cash cow? Sure. Whatever, is this what he's known for? Sure. But he's doing all this because he actually enjoys it, right? It's like, if he can make a living off of it, that's great. If he couldn't, he would find other topics as well. But he would probably still cover Ashes of Creation because he really loves the topic. And he probably loves editing these videos. And especially loves wearing those fucking underwear of Steven. God, I hate those. Like, I don't want to see a man in his underwear. I don't know.
Balance is an aspect of MMORPGs that has plagued this genre since its inception. Developers seem to be particularly bad at balancing in the current year, and I think there's a pretty obvious reason for that. And it's the reason I'll be tying this topic to Ashes of Creation. You see, I'm not just pulling content out of my ass, I'm going into this script with a plan for once.
Oh, for
But
once.
before we get into that, our patrons and I
Yep.
would love for you to grab yourself a
Good job on the patrons.
super
I feel like it's
killer,
getting longer and
because
longer every
I have an
time.
opinion about balance that is probably considered the minority, but favors that olden days of MMORPGs back.
I feel like, so if I feel like his opinion is not a minority. I think everyone can relate and understand it. But I feel like most people won't want to be cheated by the game for making the wrong choice, right? So it's like, I feel like everyone can understand. It's like the balance is not great to have because it doesn't make a lot of sense. But at the same, because also it leaves very small room for like RPGing, for playing your character out, right? For like making cool and funky builds, right? That's what RPGs were about. Make your own build the way you want to play it. But in an MMO, you can't do it. But at the same time, it's understandable why you can't do it as long as you take balance into account. I feel like his opinion is not like, out of this world. I feel like everyone can understand this opinion and how it ruins the RPG of the MMORPG. But I feel like it's also very necessary for MMORPGs to have that.
Back before they became corporate. But there is certainly a balance to be had, and hopefully my words today will enlighten you to a few concerns I have with Ashes of Creation's balance and how the general attitude towards balance has changed over the years. Now, with all that bollocks out of the way, let's begin, shall we? So, fun MMOs in the current year are debatable. If you're playing MMOs, you're either depressed and desperate to feel like you did back when you were in your teens, or even worse, you
Bro, I don't know,
simply
man.
don't
Like,
know any
I
better.
feel like the rogue just feels so much like, it looks so much better. The dashes and all that shit, man. I feel like that would be so much fun.
The bread and butter of an MMO is how the combat feels, which evidently means how the classes feel. Nowadays, content is designed in a way that is soulless and almost chore-like, and the synergies between players in this supposedly teamwork-based genre is almost non-existent. It feels like everyone can do everything, and it's hard to really distinguish the differences between classes. For those of you who are on the same wavelength as me, aka washed up dad gamers who are desperate for a good MMO, you already know what I'm referring to. However, before I outright tell the rest of you, allow me to stall this script out for a moment to farm some watch time. When you have the shallow class designs in modern MMOs like...
Before he continues, something that came to mind, the guy who said, like, this is why you should be worried about Ashes of Creation, stuff like that, because the bosses that Steven was like some boss from Lineage, I guess, Lineage 2, was like this flying dragon, and they had a harpoon mechanic, and it's like most of the fights, like, you're just dodging this dragon who's flying in the air, who you can't attack and stuff like that, and why that was so much fun for him. And there was another video that talked about how what the guy who made that video doesn't understand is like, it was the whole journey of getting to that boss. It was the fact that if you die, you lose a few levels and you have to regrind them back for like a week or two just to be able to go back there. It's all the crafters that work their asses off to create the gear for the players that are going to go into that raid and stuff like that. Taking all of them into account, there should be classes, again, in an ideal world, which will never happen, there should be classes whose specialization is massive group play and raiding. There should be, like, take for example, the anime Goblin Slayer, okay? He is really good at dealing with goblins. Okay, any type of goblin, he's really good, but put him in a in a raid or a dungeon environment where it's not about goblins, he's not gonna be very good there. Okay, his whole shtick was goblins, right? And having that in as an RPG inside the MMORPG, is cool. That's something you can do in a single player RPG, right? The problem with the MMO, you have to balance this out with other players, because then the player who didn't know that he's becoming the Goblin Slayer rather than somebody who can do everything, a jack of all trades, he would feel cheated about it, right? But it's like, what are you going to do? Like, it'd be like, well, choose this class, and in the description of this class excels in ABC, but really bad and won't be invited to, DEF, right? And it's like, well, I don't think they'll ever do that,
Like Guild Wars 2 and Elder Scrolls Online, your class is really only a flavor and not hyper-focused on a specific role to play within a group, like a tank, healer, or DPS. You're given the freedom to play how you like, and every playstyle is more of a hybrid that supports the group dynamic in different ways, using weapons and gear to mix up their loadout. However, the problem with a build that allows you to be what you want, giving you the freedom to use whatever you want to use, it makes these kind of MMOs very prone to falling into meta builds, because having that much freedom tends to make the power gap between players vastly unbalanceable. It ends up being a split between the players who want to win, min-maxing the fun out of the game's freedom of choice, and players who just want to have fun experimenting with the freedom on offer, making these two types of players insanely different in terms of output. The mentality in these games tends to be, if you're not using...
And at the end of the day, the ones who are having the most fun are the theory crafters, because they actually get to experiment with builds to see which one's going to be the best, while everyone else just follows what the best is, once the theory crafters figure it out. Because every time there's a patch and there's nerfs to like certain abilities, that's why in in ESO, you had tank metas, then you had healer metas, then you had poison metas, like dot metas, right? And always changes. Can you still play a dot build outside of a dot meta? Yeah, and you can still make it successful, but it's a lot harder than if you go with the meta, right? So the only ones who are really having fun here are the theory crafters, because they actually are the ones exploring these options.
A meta build taken from some third-party website you're not even worth considering to bring along to encounters, shattering that illusion of freedom entirely. But let's take it one further. There are some MMOs that just opt into not using classes at all. These are MMOs like RuneScape,
I love
Albion
that.
Online, and New World, where the classes themselves are actually the gear that you equip. You are defined by your weapon and your armor, and you can swap everything out at a whim to change exactly what your
I love that. I do not love how they made it in New World, though. I love it in like older games, like T4C was probably my favorite. You start as like this human, you're asked questions in your character creation. You're asked some questions. Based on your answers, it will give you certain stats, kind of like how Mountain Blade works. Will give you certain stats, and that's your build, and you start from there, and like you can choose whatever you want. You can start increasing your intellect and like buy spells. You can start using strength, endurance, and dexterity to use weapons and stuff like that, and certain armors. And you can actually like just go like a war major. You can go like as a paladin, which is like strength and wisdom, right? So it's like, and I found that to be my favorite by far design for an MMO. The problem is, it's hard to balance, right? Especially as the gameplay develops to Unreal 5 engine, it's going to be extremely harder to balance, because there are more and more options you can play with.
I hate this kind of system because it favors an extremely limited skill set, removing that RPG factor of MMORPGs altogether. It worked in RuneScape due to that MMO being a literal browser game made in Java. So why MMOs in the current year are trying to replicate this to fix a problem that doesn't even exist is well beyond me. Lack of talent,
I don't understand why he doesn't. I really don't understand why he hates this. The classless MMORPG is the most RPG you can go, because you choose your class as you go along, right? Imagine you just like, the way I see like RPG as a whole, like you become this adventurer, right? Unlike in Final Fantasy 14, where you choose your class before you become an adventurer, you become an adventurer. It's like, man, I finished school, whatever. I just want to be an adventurer. I want to go kill mobs. And as you kill mobs and as you gain experience, you're like, what specialty do I want to focus in? I want to focus on magic, but I also want to have a big sword, and I want to have big armor, but I also want magic. So, well, there's some trading to do, because if you want to, like, work out and get big fucking muscles, it's gonna take away from your time of learning magic. Therefore, your intellect will be lower, strength will be higher, intellect will be lower than someone who goes pure intellect, who studies the whole day, right? I feel like that is the most RPG you can go. I really don't understand why he doesn't like this, but whatever. Can you call it lazy design? Like, well, we don't have classes and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, sure, but it's like the more options, the better, I think. No?
Suggest, I think it's pretty obvious this weapon-based system is universally disliked when Albion is on life support, appealing to mobile gamers sitting on their toilet, and New World might as well...
The reason I don't like how New World works is because the weapon you wear dictates the skills. That's what I don't like. Being able to learn whatever skills you want based on your stats and stuff like that, I feel like that's better. I do not like the New World system at all, because the New World system doesn't take stats into account. So everything that happens is like, you change weapon, you change your character. No, I don't like that. There's no meaning to your choices here, because you're gonna be like, well, I guess I don't like bows. I'm gonna go change to like swords now because that's the meta, right? So it's like there's no commitment to whatever build you're trying to work towards. There's no reason to work on a build because you can be everything at any point in time. So in that sense, I agree. I don't like the New World system. But as far as like something like RuneScape, which I didn't play, but I think it's a similar system to T4C, I really like that.
be the shit that is splashing into the toilet bowl at light speed as their player numbers rapidly decline. I actually get the feeling New World is a special exception when players with zero gear are clapping 60% of people's health with one instant cast ranged attack. Surely that's skill, right? Nothing to do with the talentless, developers over at Amazon Game Studios, multi-billion-dollar company, by the way. So what does that leave us with? Well, it pretty much leaves us with the two currently best-performing MMORPGs, and coincidentally, the two MMOs that still have some form of old-school class design: World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV. Now, you guys know I'm not in the business of complimenting these two MMOs in the current year due to their terrible single-player mentality. However, their class design is certainly the best in the genre, and I think it probably plays a huge factor to why they remain popular today. When classes and roles are clearly defined and players have actual class fantasy to work off, I think a lot of the appeal of an MMORPG is already done for you. That traditional warrior, cleric, and rogue mentality is something missing from all of our currently popular MMOs except these two. But fantasy is, in my opinion, not enough. It needs something more, something that modern MMORPGs, including 14 and Retail WoW, have forgotten all about to make everyone feel special in the name of balance. So let's discuss this next, taking a little trip to the past, to a time when MMORPGs weren't utter dog shit. It's no secret that I am the type of boomer who reminisces the pre-Cataclysm.
The thing is, like, even though he says when MMORPGs weren't utter dog shit, so okay, his reasoning for saying it's like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 14 are the best MMORPGs right now because probably because they have the most players. But if you look at it that way, before in the past when MMORPGs weren't dog shit, I'm sorry, you have way more players playing any MMORPG right now than you had when EverQuest was a thing. So technically, we are in comparison, based on this logic, we're in a golden age of MMORPGs because you have so many people playing it right now. You have like millions of people playing it right now, whereas before you could barely get like 100,000 because the servers would crash, right? So to say that Final Fantasy 14 and WoW are the best because of numbers in terms of MMORPG, I don't necessarily agree. I think they are the best because of other reasons, because they cater to single player a lot more to single player. That's why they're also like very popular. Whereas like pure MMORPGs that make you group and stuff like that are not as popular. But even those ones have more players than EverQuest ever had before WoW. You know, it's like the metric is a bit off, you know? It's like, why are they the best? Because they have the most players? You know, it's like, if that's the metric we go by, then almost every mmoRPG is better than the MMOs you had back then, right?
Era of mmoRPGs, the time before Khotix and Ghostcrawler got their demonic claws on my beloved childhood and twisted the mmoRPG genre into
What did Ghostcrawler get his claws on? On beloved genre? I mean, Ghostcrawler didn't do anything yet. You don't even know. Like, the thing is, I don't mind him saying that the people who are complimenting Riot might be wrong. I don't mind that. But, like, the same reason, like, why you shouldn't be shitting on the Riot MMO until it's out is the same reason why you shouldn't be complimenting it. It's not out. You don't have information.
to the sad, shallow, single-player shit show that it is today. In my opinion, it isn't just the class fantasy that's an important part of balance and design. Class identity also plays a massive...
Okay, here's an example, okay? Many people would consider Skyrim one of the best RPGs out there, right? I would say I'm not crazy to think that, okay? I get it, like, I personally don't like Skyrim too much. It was fine for like a playthrough or two, but like whatever. What does Skyrim have? It doesn't have classes. It has choices. From the get-go, you're not a class. There's no class fantasy except for your race, but everything else is a choice. Your skills are a choice. The items you use are a choice. Everything is a choice. And I feel like that is a lot better than something like The Witcher, where it is a very good RPG. Don't get me wrong. I like Witcher way more than like Skyrim. But as far as choices, you role play as Geralt. So you can view it that way, right? So as a role play, you're playing Geralt. But in my opinion, in RPGs, I wanna play something that I want to create, you know? I mean, if I want to roleplay as myself in a game, that's fine. If I want to roleplay as a mage in a game, that's fine. If I want to roleplay as a warrior in a game, that's fine. If I want to roleplay as a battle mage, that's fine. But having more options for roleplay, in my opinion, is superior to just roleplaying as the class or the character that you are forced to play, right? I would kind of like, so for example, WoW Ascension, right, which is like a private server that you can basically make your own character completely the way you want to. You can be a warlock paladin, right? It's like stuff like that. Ish, right? I feel like that is more fun than playing classic WoW. And many people would probably agree with me. I don't know if majority of people, but many people would agree. Why? You have the choices to be whatever exactly you want. You don't have a class, right? And classless RPGs, in my opinion, were always more fun. Just because, so for example, I like Diablo 2 way more than I liked my favorite MMO of way back when, T4C. But the reason I liked it was completely different. In my opinion, if Diablo 2 had classless Diablo 2, I would then like it more than Diablo 2. The reason I like Diablo 2 more than I liked, let's say, a T4C, which was like choose your own class, was a completely different reason. It was like the gameplay was better, the story is something I liked. But if the class was whatever class I wanted to be, I would enjoy it way more than having it locked to classes, right? Similar to why I enjoyed Diablo 1. Diablo 1, you choose out of 3 classes. You have the warrior, the archer, and the mage. But you can play the mage as a warrior if you really wanted to, right? Because it's all stat dependent. And you don't have these certain skills. You just have skill books that you learn. So Diablo 1, in my opinion, was a superior design to Diablo 2, where you were locked into classes, right? Just because Diablo 2 inside the class had so many more options was better. But if you had so many options in Diablo 1 would be better as well, like, you know, up the graphics and all that stuff, right? If everything else is equal, the design itself, Diablo 1 superior to Diablo 2, in my opinion.
Factor into this as well. But what is class identity? For the younger ones in the audience, the only place you'll ever see class identity in the current year is from Classic WoW and Classic The Burning Crusade. Sadly, both of them are long gone now to make room for
like in Wrath, you can also
Wrath of
see
the Lich King, where class identity has unfortunately begun being phased out to make room for the modern style of group play.
Did Wrath kill class identity? I don't feel like it did. There were more mixed stuff, sure, like a lot of like you know, like warriors start healing themselves and all that stuff. But I don't feel like maybe it was like where it started to going to shit. Sure, like a lot of things, like, you know, like the dungeon fight and stuff like that. But as far as like, I don't know, I don't see it. I feel like it still had class identity to a decent extent.
That being, everyone can pat themselves on the back for being as meaningless as everyone else in the name of balance. Everyone has some form of gap closer, some form of self-sustain, and
Who is everyone? Not red paladins, I'll tell you that. Some sustain, yeah, sure.
interrupt, defensive cooldown, and multiple utilities that do
Okay, so that's what it
basically
means.
the same thing. Every class
I mean, would interrupt be a class identity thing? I don't know. I feel like the class identity is more like how your skills interact and how you use them, rather than something like a utility-ish, like an interrupt, right? Like, for example, paladins still had the seals and blessings. The paladins have seals and wrath? I think they do. Yeah, they're pretty sure they do. So you still have the seals and stuff like that. Warriors had their, like, warriors are the ones who had gap closers and were like using big fucking holy shit, big weapons, you know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this. I mean, well, didn't everyone have an interrupt, to be honest? All DPS have an interrupt or something like that in Classic? Maybe not.
has access to everything, just with a slightly different flavor. This wasn't how it always used to be. I revere the Burning Crusade as the peak of group balance because it dared to actually retain the RPG in mmoRPG. However, this is where my opinion of balance begins to ditto the minority, because as
I don't really
classic
agree.
The Burning Crusade showed us, it wasn't balanced very well at all, or at
No, it
least
wasn't.
by modern standards. But that's exactly
By any standard, it wasn't balanced at all. What standard was it balanced by?
the point. It's that modern expectation that takes away from the fun of an MMORPG.
See, the thing is, this is why I am going to strongly disagree with him. Like, why balance is really important in games like WoW? Because there's no other content outside of the content where you need balancing. PvP has to be balanced. Dungeon runs have to be balanced to an extent, so everyone can at least do it with a moderate difficulty. Some, obviously, you know, the mages are going to have a better time because of like permanent slow and stuff like that. But everyone should be able to do it. PvP should be pretty balanced. Raiding should be available to everyone. Okay, because that is the only content. Now, if you had a shit ton of other content in the World of Warcraft that you can do, and you are attracted to that content, then I would say, listen, you want to be a gatherer? Well, druids are the best gatherers, but they suck in raids and dungeons. You're like, well, I don't care. I just want to be a gatherer. Make your druid. Who cares if it's balanced or not? Because that your goal as a druid is to be a tree hugger, which they are. Okay? But because the only content in WoW revolves around combat, then the combat has to be balanced. That's the problem, right? If Ashes of Creation can create so much content that has nothing to do with combat, then I'm okay with them not balancing it completely around combat. Everyone should be able to do combat to an extent, but they shouldn't be the best at it or close to the best when someone's specialty is combat. Like this guy, 2 swords, he just wants to fucking fight shit. Okay, he's a berserker. Like all of his abilities revolve around fighting. But listen, if you put him in a library, this guy will go fucking crazy. Literally entering into a library gives you like a mental fucking illness, okay? I'm fine with that. Then yeah, you can go ahead and do that. Though I still believe classless is the best, but yeah.
Geez, sometimes less is more, and in my opinion, balance is one of them things that apply to this. Sure, the Burning Crusade wasn't very balanced in terms of output and fairness between the classes, but believe it or not, it's not very fun to have 12 classes that all do the same thing, just with a different shade of grey. Boring, shallow, and lacking in identity.
Do they do the same thing? I mean, I don't believe even in Shadowlands, Death Knights, Paladins, and Warriors do the same thing. Right? It's like, are doing the same thing in Shades, but it's like, so I can consider that as the same for everyone. right? It's like, well, he casts a spell, it does damage. It's like, this argument is kind of weird to me, right? It's like doing the same thing, but in a different shade. It's like, but that, like, you can consider, like, this is too broad of a statement. Like, you can literally take this into any argument, right? It's too broad of a statement.
For example, there were some specs in the Burning Crusade that just flat out performed poorly individually, but they brought to the raid something no other class could, and because of that, it increased the overall performance of your raid significantly. These classes would be the Shadow Priest and the...
You still have it in current WoW. Warlock gates, stamina buff, like the raid buffs, basically. The raid buffs from classes. You need a warrior because of the shout. You need, like, the fucking mage for the intellect. You need the warlock for the gates. You need the priest for the staminas. So it's like, you can still use this argument. Like, it's not... Is this what class identity is? I don't buy it.
Survival Hunter, extremely well-designed classes in terms of rotation, purpose, and role, and it's these niche support roles that make not only MMOs so fun to play with a guild, but just RPGs in general, which is the perfect segue for us to begin shilling Ashes.
Look, I agree that it makes it more interesting, but at the end of the day, it's more like, is this interesting spec better to bring? Like, are the buffs that good that I would rather bring this guy than somebody who does a lot more DPS? That's really where the question is, right? You bring priest for PIs and stamina, right? Is that class identity? I mean, like, if PI was not as powerful and if the stamina wasn't as useful, you wouldn't bring a priest. But they would still be able to do it. You just wouldn't bring them because, like, the numbers don't... So it's like it still revolves around the balance, right? Paladin brings bubbles, right? And brings, you know, a bop, a bubble, and Hand of Freedom, and Lay on Hands. Is it useful in a raid environment? More than likely, not really. Like, there's, like, niche situations where it is, but for the most part, no. Right? So why would you bring a red Paladin? You know, the only paladin needs a holy because of defiance, devotion aura, and aura mastery, really. And then, like, the heals are about the same as everyone. So it's like, what is the class identity here? But if paladin brought a bop like that, you know, AOE bop and like AOE bubble, it's like, yeah, we're gonna bring multiple fucking paladins, not because of class identity, because it's fucking broken as shit, right? AOE lay on hands, like, fuck yeah, let's go. Right? So it's like, it still has to do with the balance, not just the utility. The utility is like, it's cool to have, but if it's not as useful as having someone who's like really fucking strong, it doesn't mean anything.
Of creation. However, this final segment is a fairly cynical opinion on the game's planned 64 class design, as I'm not entirely convinced this kind of system can work in the current year.
Fun overbalance. I agree with this. I'm totally fine with people who like gonna specialize in something that is not like... See, here's the thing. They said it's gonna take a shit ton of time to level up. If you make a bad choice, it would suck. However, there has to be a way to respec in the game. It doesn't have to be an easy way to respec, but there has to be a way to respec. Otherwise, people will abandon their character. So it's like the whole point of the thing is like, you want to be the character that you're playing and stuff like that. I get that. And that's really cool. But at the same time, you don't want people to abandon their characters for bad choices. Okay, people make mistakes. It is still a game. Let people respec. I'm not saying the respec should be super easy, right? Make it like require certain quests and missions and whatever and achievements. I don't know, right? And some gold costs or whatever. But let people have the ability to respec. Don't make it too easy to the point where it's like, let's say this: if respecing takes you like 3 weeks, you only play your character for a month and a half, and you're like, fuck, I want to respec, then you might as well make a new character instead of spending 3 weeks on like trying to respec, because you're gonna end up approximately the same point with less time, you know, because like a month and a half plus 3 weeks, that's 2 months and a bit, instead of like replaying a month and a half and like, okay, well, now I'm in the exact same spot, but I am where I want to be, right? So give the people the ability to respec. Don't make it too easy. again, if this is also like, I don't know what their monetization, I think they said they want to be monthly payment as well, like a sub, buy the game and then a sub, then I really fucking wish the respecs are not gonna be too hard to get. They should be still hard to an extent, but not that hard. Because, like, you're just gonna waste people's time and money, you know? If the sub is that's why I'm saying like WoW is a big waste of time, because it's wasting people money. If it was a free to play game, you buy the game and they can waste as much time as they want, I don't care, because I'm not paying for that time. When they're specifically wasting your time for the sub, then yeah, fuck you. I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, right? I don't like that feeling, and that's like another reason why WoW sucks. And I wish they won't do it in Ashes of Creation. Not because $15 is a lot of money. It's like, it's not that. It's the principle, right? It's like, I don't want a game. I don't want to feel like a game is taking advantage of my time and my money, you know? If it's just the time, then it's fine. If the game is free to play, you know, it's like, is Elden Ring wasting my time? Yes, a lot of times, yes, but it's a one and done. Like, I paid, I play whenever I want, and that's fine. Right? In an MMO where it's a sub-based, no, I don't feel that way.
Boasting a whopping 64 classes, and I spent the whole month of June diving deep into the class design, combat, and various group synergies related to Ashes of Creation. So much so that it ended up being a pretty sizable playlist, and I'll link that for you up in the top corner. Now, it's important to go into this segment highlighting the fact that we currently do not know the extent of how much augments and secondary classes will change the core design of the base 8. But this multi-class system isn't unique to Ashes of Creation.
Oh, no.
Anyway, previous
Not at all.
MMOs have experimented with various different types of multi-choice options. Guild Wars 1, Lineage 2, and Arcade all being labeled a complete balance nightmare. So it is concerning that Ashes is trying to attempt a multi-class system again here in the current year. However, there is a simple fix to this balancing issue, and Intrepid are utilizing it to make sure the game remains true to
Rock, paper, scissors system.
that class fantasy without compromising the core identity that the base 8 offer their group. You do not gain any new spells when you choose a secondary. You're just changing the functionality of your core class's base spells to suit the fantasy you've chosen to go with. A cleric, for example, offers death and life augments to other classes, so it's safe to assume that choosing a cleric as your secondary with a tank will turn you into a class focused around defensive, wholly augmented abilities due to the class being called a paladin. But
Okay, so let me guess. So it's not that... So the second class doesn't give you new abilities, it augments certain abilities within your class. Is that kind of how it is? So for example, if a warrior chooses a priest, right, then the priest's defensive capabilities, or he will empower the defensive capabilities of the warrior. But if a priest chooses a warrior, the warrior might enhance the offensive capabilities of a priest in a way, or like maybe change the armor that the priest can wear. So whereas like if a priest chooses mage as his second, then it would increase his like damage capabilities as a spellcaster, right? Because priests will definitely have some damage spells. Is that how it works? Or like mana capabilities or something like that, like better mana regeneration. So what's a priest times priest, you know? What's a warrior times warrior? Berserker? What is that going to enhance, right? So I guess like every class is an augmentation. They're gonna say that's like, okay, warriors augment physical damage, hunters augment range damage, mages augment let's say spell damage, priests augment healing or defensive powers, right? Rogues augment, I don't know, maybe movement speed and attack speed or something like that, right? I mean, that could be cool. That's fine, I guess. Yeah. So it's not, yeah. If that's kind of how it works, I guess that's, yeah.
on the other side of the coin, mixing a cleric with a summoner will likely focus more on the death augment side of the fantasy, as that class is called the Necromancer. This polar naming dynamic is seen across all of the 64 classes, so I predict this secondary class choice won't be as wildly free as we think it will. And
Okay.
in my opinion, that's the perfect balance to strike when it comes to MMORPGs. It could very well end up being that these secondary arguments are basically just like choosing a spec in World of Warcraft. You see, sometimes complete freedom isn't always best to offer a player base who are obsessed with min-maxing the fun out of the game. So focusing on specific aspects
I don't know, if you're min-maxing, offering the most freedom is probably the best thing you can do. If you're enjoying the min-maxing. For regular players, I can see like why that's not the best case. But I love, like I said again, I'll say it before I say it again, I love being able to play my character the exact way I want to. And then there was a rebirth system in that game. So it's like I rebirth and I choose a different way to play the same character, right? So you take the same character on multiple journeys through different builds and just, I find it way more fun. I probably minority because that's not the go-to, but I feel like the reason most games don't do that is because it's impossible to balance. If they're taking balance to account, it is impossible to balance a completely free character rather than like class-based MMOs.
will likely turn out much better than all the previous MMOs that tried to create a multi-class system. I think the focus for Intrepid should be to bring back that fun RPG aspect of build diversity. Having support builds be viable in the same way they were back in the Golden Age is a really unique and interesting way to bring in niche builds to mix up a group's dynamic. But this is most certainly not an easy feat and requires a very talented team to pull it off. Talent, I believe, exists at Intrepid, considering everything that they've shown us this year. So now, to end today's video, allow me to ask you a question, my dear viewer.
Yep.
Would you prefer a game that is balanced perfectly, having every class perform similarly in terms of output and utility, or would you prefer a game that has niche but useful builds that, although don't perform well on an individual level, bring unique buffs and opportunities for your group? Personally,
I am closer to option number 1 out of these two. By far. My main problem is utility cannot be put into numbers, and that is really hard to balance around. However, I very much prefer the game style of my paladin versus my warrior or my DK. Even though they essentially do the same thing, minus the different utilities that they have, I still prefer just the game style, the way the abilities look and stuff like that of a paladin. And I'm sure many people would agree that whatever they main in World of Warcraft is the reason, is like they, even if something plays extremely similarly, it won't be the same thing because it feels and looks different. So a lot of times that would be the case. It's not even so much about the utility, it's more about the feel of the character. So in that regard, I would go with option 1. However, if option 3 is like a completely classless, stat-based adventure, yeah, I'll take that any day.
Personally, I'm of the mind that choosing unique ways to make classes interesting is the way to bring back that long-lost identity. But having a class roster like this is not the easiest path for Intrepid to go with. However, the path of least resistance is the path all of our currently popular MMORPGs go with today to save on costs and time. 2 factors Ashes of Creation are not bound by, so I'm excited to see if the team...
I don't know if they're really saving on costs when they have to specifically design classes and balance them. I feel like just having it free to play and not having to balance it out so much would probably cost them a lot less money. But what do I know?
Can bring back that old school RPG design that made our massively multiplayer games so special. But as usual, I am just one nerd desperate for a good MMO, and my opinions mean nothing without yours in the comments below. And hey, I opted in for...
And that's the practice on that like last statement of his is crazy, because he does pretty much always the same thing. When he does and he moves his eyes to the end, moves his eyes to that side, right? Or like this whole like I am just one nerd desperate, like this like everything is just so. He's really good at just like doing the same thing over and over. It's crazy.
For a more serious video this time, less jokes and tangential camera segments. I'm interested to hear, alongside your feedback for Intrepid, if you felt the video was paced better or not this way. Obviously, I don't want to lose the style that you guys have grown to enjoy. However, improvements cannot be made without experimentation. So,
True.
let me know what you thought.
I like both of them. I hate, like, the intro segment. I love his intro segments. They're fucking fantastic. The only thing I hate is, obviously, this. I hate this. But everything else, I think, like, everything is pretty much perfect. The amount of jokes, honestly, look, if the jokes don't come naturally, don't say them, you know? If you can make this video and, like, you would have something to say that is actually funny and stuff like that, fuck it, say it, like, who cares, right? I don't think it's, like, it matters if the video is serious or not, because in my opinion, this video is not much more serious than any of his other videos about Ashes before, unless he's making fun of someone specifically. The only reason that's, like, this is more serious, probably he also had less jokes to say about, which is fine. It's like, it's more authentic when the joke comes from a place of authenticity. So I'm totally fine with this. I like them both just as much. Just be authentic. And yeah. Either way, I do love his videos. I'm gonna give this one a like. Narc, keep doing what you're doing, my friend. Even though I kind of disagree with you on multiple things. But, you know, it's a very subjective thing, so it's like for me specifically, obviously. But overall, I don't think his takes are bad. They're understandable. Let's just say that, even from my perspective, where I think for me it would be better the other way. But yeah, let's see what the copium thing is about.
Let me know what you thought.
But
Narc,
you boomer, back in the day, the reason classes got away without being balanced properly was because there was no meta guides. If you want a true old school experience, just play Pantheon.
oh my
And to
god.
that I say, listen, kid. The only reason Pantheon won't have meta guides or meta builds on
Someone will
YouTube
be
for
playing.
people to follow is because no fucker is going to be playing it, and if you think that they will, then you're high on copium.
What is the song? I want to hear the rest of the song. Cool song. Anyways, yeah, that's the video. Awesome video. Holy shit, I'm fucking reacting like a motherfucker today. All right, well, that's that, and I'll see you on the next react. Peace.